both those here at Huntingdon and those who are watching our meeting on live stream. Everybody is welcome. My name is Councillor Anna Smith. I'm the representative from Cambridge City Council, Deputy Mayor of the Combined Authority, and also Chair of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee. Before we start, just to remind you that the Combined Authority does allow filming and photography at its public meetings, so please do feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? I'm just taking the opportunity to model that on the large number of devices I have in front of me. There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will all move to the muster point, which is in the High Street. I would remind members and officers that this meeting will be recorded. So we're going to start with item 1 on your agendas, which is announcements, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. In terms of announcements, first of all, I would like to extend a welcome to Judith Barker, who is our new Director of Place and Connectivity. Have I got that title exactly right?
I believe so, yes. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here and looking forward to working with everybody.
Thank you. And just to say, Judith joined us a couple of days ago, so be gentle. We do still have Steve Cox here. He's been our interim director, and Steve will be with us for a little bit yet, I believe. But I do want to extend our thanks to Steve for the amazing work he's done in the interim role until we've managed to make a permanent appointment. So thank you very much, Steve. We now come to apologies. Would the governance manager let us know of any apologies? Thank you. And Councillor Bisbee, thank you very much, because I know that you've had to kind of change a few things around to be here, and we're very grateful. Does any other member have anything they want to raise on apologies? Councillor Carling. Wakeford, good start.
I sound like it. Yes, wrong Sam, Chair. I am here currently, as you see, but I'm afraid I'm going to need to slip off fairly swiftly afternoon, so a bit early. So my apologies in advance for that.
And I have a bit of a juggling act to do today, because we do have Councillor Wakeford, who needs to leave bang on 12. We also have one of our officers who is stuck in the rather awful traffic, I think, that a lot of people have faced, which is a good reminder to all of us why the Transport Committee exists. We are there to hopefully help transport to work more smoothly in future. That means I may be doing a little bit of juggling around on agenda order, so please bear with me, because we need to ensure that voting items are placed in an appropriate point of the agenda, and also that we've covered off the things that Neil Byers needs to cover off when he's actually here to give the presentation. So please bear with me there. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in any item being considered today? Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have to declare that I am a trustee of the FACT organisation and also chairman of the combined authority of the Hereford Community Rail Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we've had that raised before and decided that that is not something that would stop Councillor Seaton from voting on the items. But obviously let us know, Rena, if something changes as we go through that. Thank you, Councillor Seaton. Any more? And a reminder, of course, that declarations of interest can be made at any point during the meeting. I'm normally quite strict at people butting in, but if there is a declaration of interest, just keep your hand up and I will take that as soon as possible, appropriate moment. For the benefit of those watching, because you can't always see who is present, I just wanted to go through who we have in the room in terms of members of the committee. So we have Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson, who is the Mayor of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. We have Councillor Alan Sharp, who is from East Cambridgeshire District Council, we have Councillor Ray Bisbee. From Peterborough City Council, we have Councillor Neil Shaler. From Cambridgeshire County Council, we have Councillor Sam Wakeford. From Huntingdonshire District Council, we have Councillor Chris Seaton from Fenland District Council, and we have Councillor Peter MacDonald from South Cambridgeshire District Council. We are also joined by Ms Rebecca Stevens and Mr Andy Williams, who are representatives from the Business Board. They are non-voting representatives, so if you notice they're not voting, it's not because they're abstaining on everything, it's because they can't vote. But we're very grateful that they are here. Item 2 is the minutes and action log. Is the committee happy to approve the minutes from 15th of November 2023 as an accurate record? Remind me, do I need to take a vote on that? Or is it just by assent? Right, we will have that accurate by assent. I do believe there are a couple of updates on the action log. So Tim, you're going to give us those.
So specifically on item 4, which is around the rural connectivity and the active travel. So our active travel officer has been in touch with the rural constituent councils and have been engaging with those councils on an individual basis to understand what the concerns are regarding active travel in rural areas. Though that the information from those meetings is being collated, and we had a meeting yesterday with Active Travel England, myself and the Active Travel Officer, and we had extremely positive feedback from them on the work we're doing, and they are looking to present them to us. So maybe the committee, but definitely to the combined authority around the next steps they're doing around rural accessibility. So that some of our work is being fed directly into that work that they're doing, but also it will be fed into the LC whips and some of the work we're progressing on the active travel scheme going forward for the next 1 to 2 years. Do you want me to do the next item or yeah. And then on item 5, which is around Surrey Station, so the Office of Road and Rail published more information recently, so we're putting that into the mix, and also the train operator is also providing information on the ticketing data, and we're trying to get to a level that we discussed previously in this meeting, especially raised by Andy Williams, around some of those getting into detail and the granular level, and with it taking time to get that information from ORR and the train operators. But once we do, we'll then present a more detailed and informed position on this station.
Thank you, Tim. That's very helpful. Nick?
Thank you, Chair. It's just to follow on from Tim's positive comments around the Active Travel England liaison. And on this, I'm just going to blow my own trumpet. I enjoyed meeting Chris Boardman, who is obviously head of Active Travel England. And I think we're in a very good position and grateful for the officers for helping organise that alongside the team from the County Council. We not only use the Chisholm Trail, which I've done a couple of times now, but we actually at least went semi-rural, and then we went out to Northstowe and showed some of the kind of opportunities that the combined authority is doing in conjunction with the County Council and the GCP around bigging up active travel. So once again, I just want to say I think the combined authority is in a good place going forward with Active Travel England, and particularly on the issue of the making the case for how we see those improvements across the whole of our area, particularly the rural areas where sometimes the sort of value for money business case doesn't always stack up, but actually is just as important as any town or city in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And obviously, I can't speak for you, but I know that I was trying desperately hard on meeting Chris Boardman to pretend that I was very cool and relaxed, and I wasn't really meeting someone quite so kind of auspicious. I also had a meeting along with officers with people from the Bramley Line organisation. That was something that we mentioned in a previous meeting as part of a response to a question. So we had a very productive and useful and interesting meeting with them. Okay, so we will note the action log as an accurate record. And we will now go on to public questions. We've received 4 questions from members of the public, all of which have been published on the website and circulated to members of the committee. Unfortunately, none of those who submitted questions can be here in person today, or I believe, have we got any online? No. So I'll ask the government manager to read each one out and I will give a response, which later will be published on the website. And if any of those asking questions are following along on the YouTube feed, then welcome to you. And you can obviously email after the meeting with follow-up questions if you have them. So, Jo, could you please read out the first question?
Thank you, Chair. The first question is from Lewis Jordan, who's Secretary on behalf of Acorn Cambridge. The question is, the Cambridge branch of Acorn, the community union, would like more details about the public consultation on bus franchising, when and where it will take place, who is running it, and what form does it take?
Thank you, Lewis, and it's really good to see you again in this context. First of all, you will note that we have an item coming up later in this agenda to give us an update on that, so I hope you're able to watch that on the live feed now or later. But thank you so much for raising this question. It is no secret that both myself and Mayor Nick want to see better buses, and we believe that bus reform is a necessary part of that. I'll need to give you quite a short answer today, but we are more than happy to stay in touch to make sure your members are fully informed about what happens next. Once we've had a final response from the auditors, we'll be discussing in board whether to go to consultation. And we'll be deciding today whether to recommend that to board, subject, of course, to the auditor's report. The consultation is going to be so important in hearing what everyone who lives, works, or studies in our region has to say. There's only so much talking we can do here in this or other committees. We need to hear from the wider public. Now, timings will depend on the speed of the other parts of the process running up to that. But were we to go ahead with consultation, it will need to follow the legislation requirements as laid out, I believe, in the 2017 Bus Services Act. We will need online and in-person engagement and briefing sessions and a set of accompanying documentation with the overview and the details. And we'll need to balance the needs of getting all the technical details out there with explaining the concept in a clear way. Now, I know members of this committee are always very keen to ensure that any consultation is proactive, reaches as many people as possible, and goes, quite frankly, beyond the usual suspects. If you have any suggestions from your members as to how we might reach a wider range of audiences, please do get in touch. Thank you. Can we please have question 2?
Question 2 is from Rod Hart, Secretary on behalf of Peterborough Climate Action Coalition. Question is, bus services across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are currently in a perilous position. Despite goodwill from across our region, the essential missing piece is funding. The 2023-24 mayoral precept provided a stopgap, preventing the loss of local bus routes, at least for now. But our current bus infrastructure and quality of services continues to disappoint local people and discourage any increase in ridership. The evidence is clear that a shift from private car use to public and active transport must form part of a transition to net zero. Indeed, CPCA's current climate action plan sets out the goal to electrify transport and shift travel from the private car to greater levels of home working, active travel and mass transport solution. This clearly is not being achieved with business as usual bus funding. This is an awful situation to be in. We now seem to have lost the option for parking levies or congestion charges. The lack of political will to support these measures leaves no source of funding to improve bus services. The ideal solution of transport polluters funding greener transport is no longer available to us. Central government also continues to disappoint us and provides no other funding option for our buses. Unfortunately, it appears that the only way out of this perilous situation is via this combined authority. We will continue to lose bus routes if we have no mayoral precept. Our current route and services might remain static if a 2024-25 mayoral precept is agreed at the level of last year, £12. If we want franchising new routes, improved bus stops, increased services or transferable ticketing, we will need a larger mayoral precept. The members seated at this meeting today represent councils that all have tools to support their residents who find paying council tax an extreme hardship. A mayoral precept is just one element of a council tax bill. Robust council tax discounts can ensure that the most vulnerable residents are protected from increases. Therefore, my question is this. Given that truly equitable solutions to fund our buses are no longer available to us, will this Transport Committee commit to supporting an increased mayoral levy in the 2024-25 Combined Authority budget?
firstly, thank you so much for this question. I do need to say to start with that this committee doesn't make the decision on the precept. It will be discussed as board so that those of us who are board members can make a recommendation to Mayor Nick. What this committee has done consistently is give its view on the importance of better buses. In fact, the agreement across our region on the importance of buses is really striking. We might not always agree on how to fund them, but we have a really significant level of agreement on the importance of public transport and improved buses as part of that. And I think that's the same whether you're in a city looking to improve frequency or timings, or in a town or village where those without a car find themselves dependent on lifts or taxis because of a poor bus service. The current situation requires immediate and effective action to ensure the sustainability and improvement of our bus services. And without it, I fear, to be honest, that we are looking in the longer term at a situation of managed decline. Last year, our precept of £1 a month on Band D saved 23 bus routes wholly or partially cut by Stagecoach. This year, we are proposing an extra £2 a month to secure our network. It should bring in over £7 million for bus improvements which will give people so much more choice and independence, and of course reduce our carbon footprint too. No one takes any rise in council tax lightly, but this rise, if supported, will provide much needed investment in our services. However, I think it's also important that we continue to engage central government on funding. The combined authorities' core funding is not linked to inflation, so we get less and less each year in real terms. We estimate we've lost over £14 million, I think is the number, through lack of inflation uplift since the combined authority was set up. And the East of England is one of the lowest funded regions in the country for public transport. We appreciate the money that we do receive from central government, such as a commitment to the £2 single fares on buses, but this does need to be reinforced with a levelled up, longer term transport funding settlement to our area. Thank you. Could we have question 3, please?
Thank you, Chair. Question 3 is from Chris Poynton, Cambridge resident. This is about the A10 corridor project. Given the findings of the Combined Authorities Independent Climate Commission and increasing global temperatures due to climate change, great weight must be given to the carbon burden of this project. The public benefit of this scheme demonstrably does not outweigh the scale of newly embedded carbon that would be created through this infrastructure project. If road building cannot be avoided, a secondary objective must be the prioritisation of public transport and car sharing. Provision of bus lanes and lanes dedicated to vehicles with multiple occupants is clearly preferable to the standard design of current A roads. Therefore, how does the Combined Authority propose to undertake the A10 corridor project while staying within the authority's finance carbon emission reduction objectives and climate action plan?
Thank you very much. So I've got a reasonably detailed answer on this, but you're obviously very welcome to get in touch and ask for more detail. Would you like it? The provision of low carbon and sustainable transport is a priority in order for the Combined Authority to meet the recommendations of the Independent Climate Commission. Decarbonisation is a strategic priority for the Department of Transport too, and central to the DfT's business case requirements of us. As a significant infrastructure investment, the A10 corridor study must assess and manage carbon impacts in order to demonstrate that robust business case to the DfT and maximise the value of this investment in tackling climate change at what we all know is a critical window for action. During the development of any potential options, due consideration will continue to be given to the overarching objectives of the local transport and connectivity plan, inclusive of the climate and environment. In addition, we need to meet the requirements of the Green Book and the DfT's expectation. The Combined Authority will need to demonstrate how any preferred scheme meets national and regional climate objectives. This study has adopted what we call a carbon-led approach. This approach has been adopted throughout the strategic outline business case addendum stage and is continuing during the preparation of the outline business case stage. The approach recognises that consideration of carbon impacts at the early stages offers the opportunity to maximise sustainability in the option sifting and selection process. This is in line with the PAS 2080 aim of maximising whole life carbon reduction, recognising there is greater scope to reduce emissions during early project development. As outlined earlier, the work also reflects carbon reduction targets established locally within existing new and emerging policies applicable to the study area, including the Local Transport Plan, the Local Transport and Connectivity Plan, and the Bus Service Improvement Plan. The selection of options early in the outline business case preparation stage considers carbon reduction as a priority alongside other scheme objectives. Consideration is also given to climate resilience, including adapting to the foreseeable impacts of climate change as part of the option selection and design process. In addition, a more detailed carbon quantification is to be completed based on updated designs and traffic modelling to inform that outline business case. It is the combined authority's stated ambition that where practical, whole life carbon reduction is achieved to be compatible with a net zero carbon transition. Now, to be clear, at present, there is no single preferred option for the next stage of public engagement, and the Combined Authority and the County Council, who are our delivery partners, are currently examining the emerging themes and possible options that could potentially be outlined to members and public in due course, and clearly there will also be discussion with the relevant district councils there. The options will include sustainable transport and active travel measures in part or in full, thereby addressing some of the environmental concerns along the corridor. Thank you. Can we have question 4, please?
Thank you. Question 4 is from Paul Hollinghurst, Cambridgeshire resident. The review of Ting demand responsive transport paints a picture of a service which has been run with unclear objectives, a limited service specification, minimal key performance indicators, and a poorly thought out service zone. The operator described little incentive to build and refine the service based on feedback and performance. The recommendations suggest a restructuring of the service area, including the partial use of a semi-flexible service, which I believe could increase loadings and make the service more useful for getting to work and education. So the Ting service needs significant change to address these issues, then time to assess the effect of the changes if the lessons from Ting are to be incorporated into the 4 proposed new pilot schemes described in the Future Role of DRT in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough report. What timescales are envisaged to incorporate recommended changes into Ting, assess the results, then procure the proposed 4 new pilot schemes? And how much flexibility will there be in the pilot scheme contracts to support the possibility of substantial ongoing changes to these linked to reviews and analysis by the CPCA?
Thank you, Paul. And as ever, it's really great to have your contributions to these committees. Officers are currently considering the recommendations from the recent Ting report and developing a model for future demand responsive transport that incorporates lessons learned as well as best practice from across the country. This will likely result in a different approach to the technology and operation of future demand responsive service trials within the CPCA, taking more direct control over the technology provider. This allows benefits such as regular data of journey patterns, utilisation of vehicles, and the flexibility to better consider new virtual bus stop requests. The intention is to link further into communities and engage with residents on the size and scope of operating zones for the service, as well as linking to the excellent community transport and dial-a-ride sector. Finally, officers will also consider existing and potential fixed bus routes in the area as identified to ensure there is no duplication of service and full integration on the transport network. Thank you. And thank you to all of those who have submitted questions. And I would encourage people to submit questions. It really is helpful to get them, and it often helps set the tone for our future discussion as well. We're now going to move on to item 4, which is the Combined Authority Forward Plan. This is an item for note. Are there any questions, comments on that forward plan, or can we take that as read? Okay, we will take that as read, and we will move on to item 5. Item 5 is the Director's Highlights Report. I'm going to keep an eye on the timing for this. If we end up with too many questions arising from this, what I will do is I will pause this item and move further questions to the end of the agenda so that we make sure that we get through the voting items when everybody is still here. Therefore, I will be turning first after that report to Councillor Wakeford to see if he has any questions, because he won't be here at the end if we do that. But Steve, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. With that, I should be very brief, recognising the time constraints. Just as a reminder, the Director's report is a way of capturing all the huge amount of great work the transport teams are doing that doesn't appear on the agenda. Items that you may have seen previously or items that may be coming to subsequent TIC meetings. I won't go through what's in this report other than to point to the attachment that we've put in on the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy, which will be coming back to the board, to the committee in March, and also to note two bids that have been submitted for one on decarbonisation and the other on e-cargo bikes, which I think very exciting bids, hopefully will be successful. But I won't say anything further. If there are any questions, Tim and the team and myself can help with those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I say this every time, but it's true every time. These committees scrape the surface of the work that goes on within this transport and connectivity team. And we could probably fill 2 committees with reports on everything that is happening. I want to thank all of them for their work and to reassure them that those of you who have got your reports appended to the highlights report, it is not because we think they are less significant. It is because obviously those voting items are the things that need to be tabled as full committee items just to get through the amount of agenda items. But that amount of agenda items is testament to the work that this team does, and thank you to all of you. Now, what I normally do, particularly for the benefit of Councillor Bisbee, is I tend to go in chunks here. So I'll try to take things in groups of 3. So I can see Councillor Shayler has a question. Councillor Wakeford, did you have any questions on this one?
Rather like you, Chair, I tend to think this could more than fill the agenda for the entire meeting in discussion about it, but in the same spirit as Steve, now I'll confine my focus to the substantive items. So thanks very much.
So I have Councillor Shayler. Any other questions or comments at this point? Councillor Shayler.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I really want to welcome this. This is the place where we do transport strategy and seeing the hubs, multi-modes, the connectivity coming forward. It's really, really fantastic. I see a mention of zero emission buses coming to Peterborough somewhere in here, and a question about the infrastructure that's required to support those buses. I have a question on page 27. There's a figure 1 shows the emissions from transport and various things. I think this might be working on outdated data. We have been looking at the different sources of CO2, and I think agriculture in our particular region from tilling peat produces a lot more than is captured in this diagram. And I'm not disputing that transport is a major source of CO2, but I think we are actually missing out on one of them. If I'm correct in looking at our more recent data on this, and I wonder if I could ask a question along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. For those of us who are looking online and therefore the papers are broken down, could you just give us the unit number? So 3 point whatever, or
this is in. Let me see. Page.
Oh, we've got it here on item 5. Thank you very much. Super.
I think it's
just helpful because obviously
yes,
you have the whole pack or you have them broken down. But I think if everyone who's going to answer that, Steve, are you going to pick up the answer on that one?
I'll certainly pick up the first of the 2 points, and I think Tim can pick up the second. Yes, on the zero emission buses, we worked really closely with Peterborough City Council prior to Christmas to submit a Zebra 2 funding bid. Really exciting bid, very ambitious, one that we did jointly with Stagecoach. We don't know the outcome of that yet, but we're pushing very hard collectively, hopefully to get a positive outcome. And in parallel, working also with Peterborough City Council on options for a new bus depot in Peterborough. So the two things very much go together. And what we aim to do and want to do is to replicate the success we've had in Cambridge on zero emission buses in Peterborough. And hopefully those two things will enable us to do that. Thank you.
Yes, and then on the EV strategy itself, Emma White, who's leading that project, is engaging with county colleagues, etc., around what the actual data is behind that, and making sure that we do reflect the agricultural element to it. But as you say, Councillor Taylor, we shouldn't downplay the significant impact that transport have, but we'll just make sure that the data is correct, and we'll go through that.
Thank you. So I have a question from Councillor Seaton. Are there any more questions anyone wishes to raise at this point? Councillor Seaton.
Thank you, Chair. This responds to item 3.3, which is the A47 high-level study. My question is, there is an A47 Alliance meeting this Friday, which I will attend via Teams. And whilst dueling from, which has always been my hobby horse, to duel the A47 from the A16 across to east of Wisbech, I appreciate that this may not necessarily be the only option available. But my question is to the CPCA, are they still supportive of looking at the options available for both the security of the A47 and the safety of it, but also the possible economic opportunities should there be dueling? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tim Bellamy, over to you.
Yeah, so just in relation to the A47 Alliance meeting, we are a member, the Combined Authority are a member of that alliance, and are continuing to put funding into the studies, etc., to look at the connectivity between the east-west connectivity from Peterborough through to Yarmouth. We think that the alliance itself need to look at the whole suite of measures. So actually, dueling is one of those, but actually there's a whole load of other items that we could progress, such as junction improvement, looking at where agricultural issues are with agricultural vehicles, etc. But dueling is one of those options that need to be put forward. What I think we need to reiterate to our members also on that panel is we need to go through the right work to make sure we get to the right conclusion. We don't jump to the conclusion, which is dueling, but it's one of the options that we take a look at examining in great detail.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments on that item? Okay, well, in that case, we will move on from that and we will go on to item 6. I see Neil is here. Welcome, Neil. Item 6 is on bus reform. Neil Byers, who is one of our transport consultants, will introduce the next item on bus reform. And before we start, Neil, I know we've said thank you to you in a lot of contexts, but I know this will be your last TIC meeting, and I want to extend significant thanks to you for the amazing work that you have done. And we welcome Andrew Highfield, who is here in the room, who will be picking up that role permanently, but has already done so. So thank you, Neil, for staying on to allow transition there and for giving this report today. There is an exempt appendix to this report. I propose that we remain in public session and refrain from commenting on the detail within that appendix. If we do need to discuss that detail, I will need to take us into exempt session. But could I have support of staying in public session for this? Could you indicate if you have a concern about that? Okay, we'll take that as assent. We'll stay in public session. I'm sure those in the public gallery will be delighted to hear that. Thank you, Neil. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for those kind words as well. So this paper sets out the progress on bus reform and the work we've been doing previously to develop the outline business case and now to work through the stage of audit. The paper sets out some of the context, the vision, the challenges that we establish around the bus network and the reason that we need to look at bus reform, and then starts to set out the information around the two options that we have of enhanced partnership or franchising. The report also provides a summary of the outline business case findings and the recommendations that are coming from that document. We're still in the process of reviewing that with the auditor, and we will bring forward recommendations and the audit report to the board once that is complete. The paper sets out the kind of recommendations and findings in the outline business case, which looks at the 3 different scenarios of investment against the 2 options of enhanced partnership and franchising. And within the paper sets out recommendations that if we looked at a medium investment scenario, franchising would be a preferred way forward. And that is what we're proposing to bring forward to the board once the audit is complete. The paper also sets out some of the information around the differences that we'll continue to analyse between enhanced partnerships and franchising at different investment levels, described as a tipping point. So we know between the fixed points we've assessed in the business case, there'll be a point at which franchising becomes the best value for money and most cost effective, and also meets strategic objectives of the authority. So we'll continue to develop that information and bring it through to board. Happy to take any questions in terms of where we've got to so far. The paper also sets out some of the next steps that we'll take through public consultation as well. I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? So we have Councillor MacDonald. Anyone else at this point? Councillor Seaton and Andy Williams. I think that will do for now. Take that as the first round. Start with you, Peter.
Thanks, Chair. Neil, thanks very much for the report and setting out the next steps. I'll try and make sure I don't go into the exempt item. Just around Grant Thornton and that appointment going back to last year, I assume, or can I assume, that when they report back, that in terms of value for money or potential value for money under franchising model, especially if that's what is recommended, that they'll be able to benchmark against a number of authorities, areas in the country, etc., etc. So ultimately, when we come to make a decision, we'll know if this is really the best value for money scheme. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Councillor Seaton, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Neil. I just wanted to ask, I know that there have been several meetings with the parish councils, in particularly in Fenland, and I know that you were going to have a conversation with them about what they are looking for, not necessarily what they're going to get, but at least what they are hoping to get. Has that happened?
And Andy.
Thanks. I think it's on the independent audit. I think it was this committee 2 meetings ago which voted, though I don't vote, to go ahead with the independent audit. But I don't see that independent audit. So will this committee get to see the independent audit and comment on it before it goes to the CPCA board?
Neil, do you want to cover those off?
So just in terms of the role of the auditor, specifically, they won't give a view in terms of the benchmarking of other organisations. What they will present to us for consideration is the information set out within the business case suitable in order for the board to make a decision. So their role isn't to step outside of the information presented to them and present other information. We can look at that in terms of the work that we do when we present to see where other decisions have been taken and where that's got to, and provide that as contextual information outside of the business case. But the role of the auditor is very much to look at the information presented in front of them and take a view of, is that sufficient in which to present a robust business case. That meeting hasn't happened yet, but we'll pick that up and follow it up to get in touch with those parish councils. We can pick that up, I think, as part of the general engagement around bus routes as well, that's happening in parallel to the conversation around enhanced partnerships and franchising.
I think, Steve, you want to pick up on that last one?
Yes, thank you. It's really just to update Tick on the timelines. As Neil has said, the audit process is an ongoing and really important process. And the discussions in the last week or so around questions, understandable questions around the evidence underpinning some of the assumptions requires us to go back to the auditors with a little bit more information, very clear about what we need to do and the timelines for us to do that. But it does mean that we'll not be able to go to the board on the 31st of January as originally planned, and we'll be going therefore to the reserve date board on the 28th of February, which gives us time, and we're comfortable that's sufficient time to address the questions that the auditor has presented to us. And coming back to Andy Williams' question, I think therefore we will play into that period of time an opportunity for TIC to be aware of the business case, and we'll come back on how we can best do that.
Did you want to come back on that? Okay, Sam. Sorry, Councillor Wakeford. And are there any other questions at this point? And we've got Councillor Sharp as well. Councillor Wakeford first.
Then thank you, Councillor Smith. No, just on the information Steve just shared with us. I have to say, I think this is as frustrating as it is as a sort of legal and procedural hoop to jump through. It's actually enormously reassuring that we've got the opportunity of the audit check, so that when board are making a decision, it has had its tires kicked as robustly as possible. And given the reassurance around timing there, I have to say it sounds, if anything, actively reassuring that the audit process is being done sufficiently robustly, that there are questions and that we're in ongoing dialogue in that way, because it helps the board make a better informed decision about this. Clearly, franchising presents enormous opportunities, as we've discussed before, but we don't want to make that decision without being in a position to be confident that it's delivering us value for money in the way that we would hope. So not a question, but thanks, and to offer my contentment with that further information. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Is it? Yes. Is it on? Yes. Yeah. Yes, just 2 points. That's useful to know from Steve, that the auditor's report, we will get an opportunity to look at it, because I think that's important. The only thing I've got to say really is on the consultation. I'm sure it will happen. Is whatever I'm sure it will be included. Whatever consultation we do, that we include as much detail as we can about, because obviously the key issue, I suppose, in some ways, is the funding, how we fund this, and that's included in the consultation, so that anybody looking at that can actually see the pros and the cons of what's being proposed. But thank you.
Thank you. And I know Rebecca wants to come in as well. I think it might be useful to get a bit more information about the nature of that consultation, as much as we know it, because my understanding is that franchising consultations are broadly focused on the principle of franchising rather than the scheme. But Neil, you may wish
If I
to
can come back very quickly, that's part of in my question, is I'm not sure how the consultation model will work, but I think there needs to be as much information as we can obviously some bits may be commercially sensitive, but as much as we can get out into the public domain as possible.
And Rebecca.
Thank you. Just a very quick one, which is about tipping point. You've mentioned that a couple of times, and while it's not in the report, it's probably in the exempt appendices, the graphs of the medium term, the low, medium, and high investment. When will we know what the tipping point is, and how will that be factored in?
Okay, so Neil, do you want to pick those up, Steve? I'll take those three to start with, then I'll come to probably, I guess, a final round of questions after that. But
yeah,
Neil.
Start with so in terms of public consultation, so a requirement of the process is for us to publish all the documentation. So everything that we've provided as exempt reports from previously. So the outline business case will be published alongside the consultation. So anybody will be able to look at the detail that have supported that business case, including the funding dimension, the financial dimension of that business case. So that is part of the process that we follow, including the auditor's report as well alongside that. So that detail will be provided through the consultation. I think, as the Chair's just mentioned, it's a fairly technical question that we're asking the public. So there'll be a challenge for us to be able to communicate that in a way that explains the choice in front of ultimately the board and the mayor to make. So we'll be doing that in a way so there's a mix of online and in-person information and opportunities to get into that detail, but all of the information will be available. We will need to consider if there are elements that need to be redacted for commercial reasons, but the key information will be there for the public to look at and comment on. Probably just worth noting, if there is interest to see, there have been other public consultations recently by authorities going through the same process. So if you do want to get familiar, then I think West Yorkshire's have recently finished theirs. But I think their questions are still available to give you a sense of what is provided and asked of the public. So just check, Chair. I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to.
Yeah, Steve, do you want to come in and? Yeah, I just turn mine off before you can do that.
Thanks. Yeah, on Rebecca's point, yeah, absolutely. I think talking to Andy's question about the opportunity for the committee to see the details, the tipping point details, we'll share as part of that briefing on the content of the business case. So we'll work through quite what that is and when, but it will be in good time before the 28th of February. So there's a chance for the committee, probably in an informal setting, to be briefed on the detail of the business case and the audit.
Thank you. And I was going to ask if that was possible. So thank you for preempting that question, because of course that will allow us to see some of the data as well that we can't put into a public session. So that might be quite helpful to look at a workshop for TIC members. I've Councillor Shayler. Menick, was that a? Yeah, I've Councillor Shayler. Menick. Anyone else? Councillor Shayler.
Yeah,
No. It is no.
all right. Yes, just a quick comment on the work to make some of these routes more viable. And again, this is about our focus on network and the overall value. Especially, I saw on bus route 7A where there is going to be some rationalisation and also bringing in home to school transport, and this is where it comes to the county where we can get together and make things more viable. Is fantastic. In 2.7, the review of the bus stops across the county, I think, is very, very welcome. This especially in rural areas, some of the bus stops are in less than a good state. And just to comment that every bus stop is an active transport hub, no matter where it is. But in rural locations, they need. We often get the questionnaires back, and it's the top of the list for to keep out of the rain and all of the things that you have to do when you're at the bus stop. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was really just to come on the back of Councillor Sharp's point. Obviously, we have to wait through process and a final decision from the board. But when assuming that some form of consultation, an agreement is that we go out to consultation on a franchising premise, and there's no secret. Obviously, I would like to see that sooner rather than later. Look, I'll be front and centre along with all the staff at the combined authority, putting it into whatever words, any documents, using social media. This is going to be a big potential change for the whole of our region. And really, it's a request of yourself and any members of this board. You've watched this process as it has sort of ebbed and flowed and sort of moved forward, but it will be on all of our shoulders to help explain, be it to the business community, be it to our constituents, about the benefits and why we're going out to consultation. So it's an open invitation to all board members to invite the mayor, the combined authority to your areas, to be engaging in the next stage of what hopefully will be, once the board agree to it. And just to reiterate, we've already, following the acceptance of the LTCP and what we've done through the budgeting consultation process, but the better buses, keep asking your residents to write into the combined authority, keep asking, being an advocate for them to say, this is where you want new services and this is where you want to see the reform. So please work with me going forward.
Thank you. And I think some of these items we'll probably pick up a little bit more in the next paper. So some of those detailed points, Councillor Shayler, we might pause until the next item. But clearly, it is hard to talk about the principle of franchising without starting to dig down into the idea that this will give us, we hope, a better network that allows us to serve our residents more effectively. So I've allowed those questions to stand on this item because there is clearly such an important link. We're being asked to both note and take a vote this morning. So there are three things to note. Note the progress That's item A. Note the exempt item, which is the draft proposed franchising scheme. And note that the CPCA board will receive the updated business case, report of the independent auditor, and recommendations to proceed to public consultation. So those are 3 things to note. A reminder, I think, might be helpful of the process in terms of item B. So the board will be discussing whether to go out to consultation. The board does not make a decision, obviously pre-consultation, on whether franchising will happen or not. The decision is to go out and ask people. And I have to say that if there's one common theme that I've heard in every single discussion I've had, and I don't think the bus operators would mind me saying this either, just get on with it. Get out there, ask people what they want, is a theme we're hearing again and again. We seem to have been talking about this for a long time. So once we have had the final report from the auditor, we'll be able to know what kind of consultations we'll be able to have in the board meeting there. So what we are doing is we are agreeing the principle of proceeding with franchising as the preferred model for bus reform for consideration of the board. We are not agreeing on franchising in today's meeting. We're basically agreeing the model that will go out to consultation. That's correct, isn't it? Just to say, because I've asked questions about this, you go out on franchising, you allow the option of either franchising or enhanced partnership to be decided upon in the end. You go out on enhanced partnership, you don't allow franchising to be discussed. So in a pragmatic way, if we're able to proceed with that after the report from the auditors, then it gives us the biggest scope to get public feedback. So there's a little bit of context there, which I hope is useful to you in the committee, because it was certainly useful to me getting my head around exactly what the process is at each committee stage. So with that in mind, I need to ask for a vote on item B. I am going to, sorry, you're pointing at something. I know, it's all right. I'm there. I would like to propose this for the vote. Do I have a seconder, please, for this item? Ooh, I think Councillor MacDonald just got there in first. So Councillor MacDonald, I am proposing this and Councillor MacDonald is seconding. Can I see those votes in favour, please? And that is unanimous by members of the committee. Thank you very much. Okay, now we stick with buses, and I believe we're sticking, Neil, are we sticking with you for this item as well? So item 7 is the bus strategy update. Neil is going to stay with us to introduce this report. Neil, to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report follows on previous reports around the work we've been doing on the bus strategy, particularly focused around the network review and a number of the services that we had further work to resolve the recommendation and way forward. The paper also includes an update around the work we've been doing on Zebra 2 and the bus stop infrastructure to note. So this paper is making recommendations on the 2 services where we had further work to resolve the way forward, so the service 29 and the Ting service, and then 2 services which we didn't have data for in order to make a recommendation. For service 29, the recommendation is to end the trial of that service, noting that there's good existing provision which has generally been duplicated, which perhaps describes why it hasn't been as successful as hoped, but also that that's set in the context of considering additional bus services and opportunities for communities across the combined authority area. And with Ting to conclude to refocus that service, as we touched on previously, to really focus on the most rural parts of Huntingdonshire and ensure that those communities are still connected, but not removing some of the duplication that was existing with existing either tendered or commercial routes. And also just to note services 110 and 203, those services we've been provided the data for now. They're performing well in terms of the benchmark of £12 per passenger journey and also providing good connections to communities, so they're recommended to be retained. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So perhaps we can take Councillor Shayler's questions from the last item as read, if there's anything you want to comment on there. Are there any other questions on this report? This stage, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor MacDonald. Okay, anyone else at this stage? And Neil, I know, yes, Neil, I know that Councillor Shayler mentioned some of the confusions around the 7A. as part of that, perhaps you could clarify for us, because I think there have been some figures raised, and I think it might be useful just to look at whether those are the previous figures before the 7A has been reformed, and what financial figures might be on the projected costs of that route on the reformed route rather than the current route. And I think it might be helpful to have some clarification on that as part of your answer, if you're able to give that level of detail.
Sorry, Chair, do you want me to come to those questions first?
Good point. Yes. Councillor Wakeford, over to you.
Neil is highly skilled chair, but possibly intuiting questions, maybe beyond even him and the bus team. Well, okay, then I withdraw that. Councillor Shayla touched earlier on the point around bus stop infrastructure, which generates an enormous amount of correspondence to us as local councillors, but also it's sort of one of those areas where we're able to give the sort of least satisfactory responses to residents asking around prospects, given the for fixing and improvement, given the wide range of ways in which infrastructure is even owned, let alone managed, and responsibilities are all over the place. So 2.7 is sort of brief in the paper, but is enormously important. I mean, really, what I want to know on that is sort of how quickly can we make it happen, and how can we make sure that infrastructure in our areas isn't missed and can support people feeding in, but fundamentally that's just endorsement to that moving forward. The main thing I wanted to say, though, was with respect to the recommendations for services under review under 2.4. Obviously, the Ting trial has been in Huntingdonshire, in my district. I just wanted to lend our firm support and endorsement to the proposed actions to adjust the Ting trial. It has been successful. It's been a victim of its own success, in part in being so popular that residents with scheduled bus service options in parts of our district have been able to make use of it, and that's been great for them, and it's been popular. But to get the maximum value from the service, it is important it's serving those more rural communities where they lack the scheduled bus options as well. And we're interested in the wider bus reform package to look at what we can do around improving bus connectivity more generally for those communities, of whom we have very many in Hunts, and we're clearly not unique as a significantly rural district in the combined authority area. But I think this is an extremely pragmatic adjustment to the coverage, as well as, of course, aligning contract lengths to minimise costs as next steps are made when we come to, as it may be, franchising or an enhanced partnership. So thank you for that, and the work that has enabled us to get to the point of continuing to iteratively improve the valuable Ting trial in our district.
And Councillor MacDonald as well.
Thanks, Chair. Just two things. It was, first of all, to thank Neil and Andy for the work that they did with myself and a number of district councillors in looking at the services in South Cambridgeshire, because when we started this process, we had quite some challenges in terms of cost and risk to services. So I think that was a good process. I think we kept the parishes informed, we kept the district councillors informed right across parties, so it's been good. Neil will recognise me as being a bit of a scratch record in saying, please can we not lose sight if we get the opportunity for a DRT trial in South Cambridgeshire. Thank you. I know we can't do it everywhere, but...
Councillor Shayla, I know you want to come back in briefly.
Just very, very briefly, actually. And of course, these two, 6 and 7, are intimately linked. And the whole, we show the kind of strategies and things that we need to do. And if we don't do things, it's going to, the network is going to continue to degrade. I think everybody recognizes that. And this is why we need the bus reform. And the other questions that I have around A7, I think Chair has made it relatively clear already. So thank you very much.
Neil, lots for you there.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks everybody for those questions. I think the importance of on-street infrastructure is absolutely agreed. And I think the relatively short paragraph in the paper just reflects that there's probably a whole new paper that's required on that, which will come forward to the committee. I think the reason to keep it in there is to make sure that we're continuing to focus across all the elements of bus strategy and bring in decisions, recommendations across each of those. So I think I would say just anticipate more from officers in terms of the role for the combined authority around on-street infrastructure and all aspects of bus services. So absolutely recognise that point and the importance and the need to bring more forward on that. Just around service 7A, I suppose the point on that one would be that the reason to make the recommendations we have to change the way that operates and consider it alongside homeschool travel as well reflects the fact that we needed to make a change and make that service more efficient. While we don't yet know what that will cost and what that will generate in terms of patronage, what we'll effectively get is a more efficient service that joins up home to school alongside combined authority budgets and more students using that service. So in the end, that should get us a more cost effective and better used service. We don't know precisely the numbers, but the numbers that have previously existed were the reason to make that decision. So we're definitely moving in a different direction to where we were on that service. And I think in terms of the questions and points around demand responsive in South Cambridgeshire, there's a commitment and an opportunity there to explore what a service would look like, and that's the work that we'll be progressing through this coming financial year, and we'll be able to provide updates on that as we move through.
Menick.
Thanks, Neil, and thank you, Chair. It's just a follow on a little bit from Councillor Wakeford's point about the Ting service. With the phrase retain with refocusing, one of the first questions I would ask is, does this mean it has to be retendered? And then the second one, I mean, I understand, the analysis, and I've watched the Ting service through good and indeed sometimes frustratingly bad for people who've been desperate to get it but can't actually get the journeys. It's been great, particularly how the community of St. Neots has embraced it, but I understand it's kind of serving a purpose that it wasn't necessarily originally set up for, this challenge of rural isolation and hence the kind of repurposing and refocusing around the routes. If all of that is happening, which makes perfect sense, and I understand why, is there also a little bit of an opportunity, bearing in mind Councillor MacDonald's, Huntingdonshire, there's parts of Huntingdonshire that almost abut onto a little bit of South Cambridgeshire and other parts of Huntingdonshire, that we could actually extend just a little bit more the rural coverage of the current Ting service. And again, I assume, going back to my first point, does that mean retendering? Because obviously in the past we had Stagecoach, currently we're using Vectare. Is there a possibility that we might end up having another operator if we do that?
I know we have Councillor Sharp as well.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, well, 3 points actually, really. The first one is on, and I'll touch on it again on another point. Two of the routes that have been under review sort of end in my division, which is right on the southeast end of Cambridgeshire, bordering on Suffolk. So, and bits of not Essex is not too far away. And those routes go cross border. What obviously in some ways the more of that, we need more of those cross border routes and linking up with colleagues in Suffolk, as I say. When, and this may be an unfair question, but when we're looking at, and it just came to me just now, when we're looking at franchising, and maybe Suffolk aren't franchising, is there an issue around that? And it may be one to park for future. The second one is touching on the I suppose it's a thing, but it's then going on to the demand responsive transport. Reading the report, I can't remember which page it was on. There's a reference there that 33% of people ring up on the day, or not ring up on the day. Sorry, they connect via mobile phone to, and because it's not available at that time, they then cancel. So I'm just thinking of them. In some ways, do we need to be looking at not educating, but certainly informing people that they can't necessarily, expect, okay, I want to go, it's 10 to 10, I want to get a bus at 10 o'clock now, whereas they could if it was a normal bus service. So there is obviously a need for education around that. And then that touches on my other point about cross-border, and I used to live in St Neots for 30 years, so I know it very well. And if you look at the rural bits, West Huntingdonshire, and it's touching on Mayor Nick's point as well, you then go into Bedfordshire, you've got lots of rural bits in there. Is there a possibility to extend it to actually capture more people? And again, you've got the issue with the councils in Bedfordshire. And then I'm very intrigued on Councillor Shayler's point. I think it was on the earlier debate, we were talking about home school transport. Because again, another one of my hats, I'm co-chair of governors at Bodisham Village College, and we have 20 buses every day into the college from all of the villages that it serves. And there must be some way of sort of using some of that to transport non students to around the piece. But those are the 3 points really.
You know, I might just add a couple of points myself, one of which is the issue of bus stop infrastructure has been raised a couple of times in this meeting, and it's certainly something it is easy, I think, to think, well, maybe that's less of a priority. It is a huge priority to people who are using the bus routes. And every time I talk to residents about buses, it is often the infrastructure that they raise in terms of the bus stop infrastructure as a key issue for them. One of which, Neil, I just wanted to share is around almost the closeness of the seating as well to the stop, and the ability, if you are not as mobile as you would like to be, and can't jump up quickly when you see a bus coming, how you're able to indicate at some stops to the bus that you want it to stop when you are sitting down at a stop that might be some distance. So I was talking to a resident that has to have her husband standing at the stop ready, and he can't sit down because she can't get up in time, and little things like that make such a difference. I really wanted to pay credit as well to the work that we're doing around that package of routes that includes the 7A, because we've heard it a couple of times from all of us in this committee around being more creative with homeschool transport, with businesses that are using bus routes, with potentially health transport as well. There are lots of possibilities where there are things running that are not currently part of the official network. And what I'm really pleased to see is that we are looking at that kind of approach. So the work that's been done with that package of routes, which includes the 7A, I think could be very, very interesting to see how that works, to see if it provides an answer for some of our routes. So thank you for that. You've got lots there. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So going to Mayor's question about retendering, yes, because it was a trial, we needed to retender it anyway. It was part of a natural kind of 12-month process, which we previously got a short extension to enable us to do that. This initial retendering will continue within the area that we've described, but over the course of this coming financial year, we'll be looking at other demand responsive trials and the opportunity to potentially separate the technology from the physical service as well, so that multiple areas can plug into one solution rather than having lots of competing ways of users engaging. So I think as the idea of demand responsive semi-flexible service grows across the wider area, we'll be able to think about how do we best do that in an efficient way. So we're using buses to serve across multiple partner areas within the region. Also looking at some of those cross-boundary questions as well about can we work with partners across boundaries to help deliver better connectivity and also funding into those solutions as well. So in the immediate term, we're retending the service on this refocused basis, but giving us that flexibility to change and adapt as we look at different demand responsive semi-flexible services for the whole of the wider combined authority area. I just started to touch on the answer around cross-boundary services there as well. So we've been engaging across all of our boundaries with partners, because there always are opportunities for people who don't see boundaries. They just want to travel where they want to travel to. I think we have good conversations. I think aligning decision-making processes and budgets and service changes can be a challenge, and we'll just continue to work on that to identify those opportunities where we can make improvements by working together across those boundaries. So it's a consistent opportunity that comes with a kind of process challenge that we'll continue to work on. So we do recognise that and that being important. And then just linking to the other point made there around that in the context of franchising. So if there's a service that is largely provided outside of our area and then comes into the Cambridge and Peterborough area, we would need to provide that a service permit. So that effectively would enable that service to continue as it was, but we would set certain requirements around the quality, the timing, how it integrates with our system. But that service would be able to carry on largely unchanged as long as it met certain kind of minimum criteria of quality. The other way around, if we wanted to franchise services that largely operated here but cross the boundary, then that would be included within the franchise arrangement. But the service permit, I think, is the specific point in there that enables those cross-boundary services that largely operate outside of the area to continue, and that would be part of the franchise approach. And then I think a couple of points perhaps together around so communication, education of demand responsive transport as a different way of using services, absolutely, and that's probably some of the lessons learned that everybody's learning around demand responsive across the country about how do users interact and understand that service. So yeah, I think it's something that needs to be included alongside how DRT is introduced to ensure people understand the differences between service buses and demand responsive. So yeah, it's a good point and needs to be considered alongside introducing a service as the communication, marketing, potential education. And then alongside but related, I think home to school transport and opportunities, not just around home to school transport, but other bus services that are moving people around the authority and how we can link that together to get better efficiency, not only for yourselves, for the combined authority, but for other partners who are paying for bus services. So that will be a continued part of the work on bus review. We've taken this work over the course of this year to get to a stage where we look at our attended services. We're taking a small step around home to school, but that should enable us and then presenting information to you to be able to make more of those decisions because we'll have better information to bring that together. So we've taken some good positive steps and we know there's more that we can take around that. And then I think lastly on bus stop infrastructure, and I think a point around design came up, particularly when we're talking about bus service improvement plan, maybe 6 months or so ago, about having some design standards that we can develop and work to. So I think that's some work that we'll need to revisit as officers and bring back some ideas and recommendations around if we're looking to invest into that infrastructure, how can we make sure that it's accessible and safe and secure and people really want to use it? Stop there.
Thank you. And I'm very encouraged by the number of questions we're getting on this item because it is a really important item to discuss. Councillor Wakeford has a question. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, with apologies for coming in a second time, Chair. But, wanted to thank colleagues from around the table and around the district for support in expanding TIM around other parts of Huntingdonshire. I'd obviously be delighted with that. But I think the case that's been made around the importance of piloting to prove concept robustly, not least given the costs involved and the fact that you know, until we work out better how to more efficiently link this in with the rest of the network, it's got a particular use case. I think I am reluctantly persuaded that now might not quite be the time to expand it across the entire district and entire combined authority area. But I think the point Neil alluded to around the separation of buses from the system is really critical, because that's helpful both in terms of the cost efficiency of future demand response in avoiding repeating and duplicating that, the technology element, but also in terms of the user experience, because I'm conscious, that the appendices go into great detail that we don't have time to run through today. But insofar as there was a negative feedback around the Huntingdonshire Ting pilot, Some of the information in there was around the apps crashing and the technology side. And if we can sort of get that sorted once across the board, it'll make it much easier for residents to use, reduce the frustrations, which hopefully should improve the points Councillor Sharp was making around sort of user understanding and accessibility as well. So I'm really pleased with the direction of travel, but as I say, reluctantly content with us focusing the pilot so we get sort of better data for the time being.
Thank you. And at some point when you have time, Councillor Wakeford, I will tell you my story of having to negotiate demand responsive transport in Belgium on the phone in Dutch. Are there any other questions at this point? First of all, thank you. Huge amount of work has underlined this, and we've mentioned in previous committees the different approach that we see to our services, the 75, I believe at the moment, soon to be slightly higher, services that we support as a combined authority. It really is very impressive. We have 2 items. We have a voting item, we have a recommendation to vote. I just wanted to mention, because Councillor Shaler, I think you raised this as a question earlier in the committee. Recommendation B is to note the submission of the Zebra Round 2 bid to the Department for Transport, as well as the update on the bus stop infrastructure work. And I just wanted to highlight the attention of the committee to item 2.6, which is the fact that we are putting in a bid for 33 zero-emission buses for Peterborough. And if successful, that will deliver 15 single-deck and 18 double-deck buses to convert Peterborough's bus services City 1, 2, 3 and 4 to an all-electric operation. Now, that is dependent on locating suitable land, but I just think that's really, really encouraging to see that there. Councillor Bisbee, I thought you might want to come in on that. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was going to raise it, but then I thought I'd leave it because of the technicalities that are going on in Peterborough. But the whole of Peterborough is looking forward to this taking place. We do need that land, and it is being looked at. And I am really encouraged by some of the things I'm hearing about it. So hopefully this will happen very quickly, and we'll be able to take it off and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm personally very much looking forward to having a ride on those first Zebra buses once we're able to find the right site in the same way that we were able to in Cambridge. It really was a really special moment. So our vote on this is to recommend to the CPCA, and I haven't forgotten, to recommend to the CPCA board the proposals for the 2 remaining tendered bus services, which were placed under review, and the bus services for which data was, I think that should say the bus services for which data was previously unavailable. Perhaps we can just be sure that that's there. I'm just looking on the online papers. I will propose this. Who would like to second this item? Councillor Wakeford will second. Could I see those in favour, please? And that's unanimous by voting members. Thank you. So can we just note that there's a word missing there? So, and apologies, Joe, for not spotting that before. So we are now on to transport funding decisions. This is item 8. We're looking at doing this slightly differently. The reason we're doing this is because we have quite a lot of requests for drawdown of funds coming through the committee. We thought it would be helpful to take them as one and then give people the opportunity to ask on anything they particularly want to ask on, rather than going through each one as a separate item. So we can really focus the debate on where it's needed. So Tim Bellamy, Acting Assistant Director of Transport, will introduce, and Emma White and Matthew Lutz are also in attendance to answer any questions. So Tim, over to you on this item.
Thank you, Chair. So within the transport funding decision paper, there are 2 decisions. One is the avoidance to Granta Park, and the other is the regional transport model. The avoidance to Granta Park was a commitment in the previous LTC, and it is also within our LTCP. And it's the 135k will be to undertake strategy work with allowing for an independent review and looking at the development of an SOBC. This funding will come from the Trampoline City Fund and ensure that we maximise the use of the TS Trampoline City Fund, and none of that funding is returned to central government. As part of our review that we did last year, we assigned the 135k to progressive work, and this will be managed by the county council. And then in relation to the regional transport model, this comes from the MTSP budget, and there's £78,430 in there. And this, just for clarity, the model itself covers the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but this specific element will focus specifically on Peterborough and making sure that we've got the model up to date to cover that area. And I think, as noted previously at TIC meetings, the model itself will allow us to undertake scheme assessment, but also to allow us to make informed judgment on strategic development going forward. So they're two quite important pieces of work. And as the chair outlined, both of the transport program managers that are undertaking those particular work streams are here to answer any detailed questions if you have them.
So I have a question from Councillor MacDonald. Any other questions? Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. Tim, thank you. So I agree with everything you've said on the Royston to Granta Park. So for all sorts of reasons, this is a very important artery across the county. For those of you who aren't so familiar, it's pre-COVID, it was carrying nearly 30,000 vehicles a day. And from the more recent numbers, Steve may be up to date, or Tim, I think it's almost back to 30,000 vehicles a day. So it's an absolutely enormous traffic flow. I forgot to bring it today, but I have a brochure at home from 1985 that was going to review the Royston to Granta Park corridor. So we're getting around to it, so that's good. One final point which is important is if Tim could support myself and the other councillors who are on the working group in appealing to National Highways to possibly looking at opening up southbound exit at junction 9 of the M11, because at the moment that's just a northbound access. And we keep harping on about it as councillors, and the reason that we do that is because we think that that would relieve a lot of pressure on on that route, on that corridor. National Highways aren't totally convinced, so any help, Tim, you can give us, or Steve, or any other officers would be really appreciated. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Shaler, any other questions? Councillor Shaler.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to reiterate what Councillor McDonald's just said. It does feel like this has been around forever, almost as long as was Beach Rail, actually. But having cycled the route, I realize that getting across the A505 is tricky, and anything that anybody can say about the active transport route across that particular roundabout would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Any more questions? Go on, Andy.
Go for it, Andy. I just feel I should, because I know that area very well. Don't forget, Sawston is also growing. It's not on the study, but you've got Unity Campus there, a lot going on there as well. And I'm always intrigued by that Liverpool Street line, and there aren't enough stops between Shelford and probably Audley End. So I don't know if the study will also include looking at links, not just to Whittleford Station, but potential new station down by Hingston, which has been postulated many times. So one's about scope, and one is don't forget about Sawston.
Tim, do you want to take those?
So with regard to the Junction 9 discussion with National Highways, from a technical perspective, I've also spoken to them around the looking at the movement on Junction 9, but also just think about the regional transport model. The regional transport model will help us to assess those movements as well, so allow us to go with an informed decision rather than us necessarily saying we would like this to actually go. This is what the actual information providing from the model. So I think the two items are inextricably linked on that, and we're happy to continue to those liaisons. So I'm happy to have discussions outside of this meeting on that And then with regard to the Granta Park with the active travel, so I think the key component part of the corridor study is to look at all modes and making sure that the accessibility and the desire lines are addressed. And actually, we look at the whole of that corridor, not necessarily just end to end, but also across that corridor as well. And then as Andy was saying, is that it's you have a look at the end to end and the corridor movement, but actually there are influences just beyond that actual corridor. So I think that part of the work that we need to work with county council colleagues with on the development of the review is making sure that we are looking at the scope, making sure we are addressing the issues in that area.
Are there any more questions on this one? Okay, I'm just going to. So I know before we come to the vote on this item, Rima, you just want to add something.
It's just to note that there should be another, it was just for noting really, that normally we'd ask for delegation to the executive director or assistant director to enter into grant funding agreements. But obviously the constitution's been updated, so the chief officers now have wider powers and delegations up to £1 million. It was just a point to note that grant funding agreements will be entered into just for transparency. I just thought I'd make that a comment, just so it's for you to note really.
Rina, thank you. That's a really helpful addition. So we have two items which are to note. That's items A and C. We also have two approvals of drawdown. That's B and D. Are there any objection to taking those together? Okay, I will propose that. Would anyone like to second that? Councillor Bisbee got there first. So proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Bisbee. Can I see those in favour, please? Thank you. That is unanimous amongst voting members of the committee. Can we record that vote, please? We now move on to, now I believe, with the exception of the King's Dyke, that is the last voting item. So Councillor Wakeford, we're making very good time. So you'll be able to come in on some of the other items as well, but we have covered those voting items. So we now have an update. This is an oral update on the A10 corridor project. We have Matthew Lutz, Transport Programme Manager, who will update us on the progress of the A10 corridor project and the potential themes that will be considered for public consultation. Matthew, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. The Combined Authority as project sponsor and the County Council as project lead thought it would be timely to update members on the progress to date in relation to the A10 to A14 improvement scheme, which is also known as the A10 corridor study. We're mindful that we haven't updated TIC members for a period of time, and since 2024 we'll see a period of intense stakeholder and public-facing engagement. Now is an apt time to provide an update on this subject and project. As a reminder, the study focuses on movement along the corridor between Ely and Cambridge and explores opportunities to address existing and future challenges around capacity and road safety. The study area covers the A10 between the A10 and the A142 roundabout to the south of Ely and ending before the Milton interchange. In addition, the study considers the impacts of improvements on the surrounding area too, so the wider study area helps us to look at possible options that do not focus solely on the A10 itself. It is useful to note that as well as the A10 corridor study, there are other improvements being delivered by Waterbeach Newtown, as well as schemes outside this A10 corridor study that are looking at the A10 A14 junction, Milton interchange, and another for the A10 BP roundabout crossing facility. In particular, improvements associated with delivery of Waterbeach Newtown include a relocated railway station, Waterbeach Cambridge busway, and a number of active travel routes. One of the key reasons we're undertaking the A10 corridor study is that current users experience congestion due to the volume of traffic, the mix of vehicles, for example, including HGVs and agricultural vehicles, and frequent road traffic incidents, particularly those clustered around junctions. For non-motorised users, and active travel users in particular, the A10 fails to provide an attractive route due to the absence of dedicated facilities. These existing issues create a constraint on the economic performance of the region and negatively impacts on the health, social well-being, and environment within the local area. These existing issues could potentially be exacerbated by the planned substantial growth in the corridor and region if sustainable transport infrastructure is not in place. The corridor study is aimed to complete the preparation of an outline business case to Green Book standards in alignment with the Combined Authorities and Cambridge County Council's assurance and governance requirements and the Combined Authorities Local Transport and Connectivity Plan. This has entailed a review and validation of the strategic outline business case, which was completed in July 2020, and to make sure that recent changes in national and localised policies, standards, guidelines and data are considered. This will ensure that the project continues to meet the grant funding requirements from the Transport Department for Transport. Therefore, re-engagement with the public and other stakeholders is really important, since this was last done in 2020, and it's key that we now allow for a period of open and transparent communication of developments and changes within the project. This engagement, including with yourselves as TIC members, will give the A10 Corridor Study team an opportunity to provide a clear explanation of the scheme developments, process, and to widely test views regarding the emerging themes and possible options, before then being able to assess a preferred package. This approach supports the Department for Transport requirement for localism to be considered. With this in mind, Cambridge County Council and the principal consultants WSP are undertaking a risk-based assessment of the different engagement and consultation options, and the team will then produce updated programmes that reflect the different options available. In relation to engagement plans, there's been significant progress to date made by our delivery partners, Cambridge County Council and WSP, with engagement activities planned throughout 2024. This is an important next step to ensure that communities' opinions and concerns are fully considered. A full briefing for TIC members will be provided in due course, outlining the themes and potential consultation material that will be tabled at subsequent TIC meetings. We'll aim to be in touch shortly to arrange the briefing session with members of this committee, with an aim for this to take place in early February. In addition, a programme and plan for delivery will also be presented to members alongside continued engagement with the A10 members working group. The output from this engagement will ensure that decision makers have a comprehensive understanding of public opinion, their concerns and potential options. This will ultimately help members to make more informed and balanced decisions reflecting the diverse perspectives of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. That's very helpful. Just to set a context on this, we are looking at arranging, as Matthew mentioned, an exempt workshop for TIC committee members prior to formal papers going out into the public domain, which will allow us to talk through some of those options first. So today, I think some of it will be around process, the questions I'd imagine. You may want to raise things that you're interested in exploring further, but just with that sense that there will be the opportunity to dig, if I may use that term, into options in more detail in future sessions. So are there any questions or comments on this item? Matthew, you've stunned them into silence. Peter. Sorry,
Well,
Councillor MacDonald.
as nobody else commented, I will. Obviously, it concerns a number of us in the room in terms of connectivity along the A10, key developments like Water Beach, which have taken place. So in terms of with my economic development hat on in South Cambridgeshire, this is going to be pretty important. So it's timely to be able to sort of stand back, take a look at what especially post-COVID, we need to be able to deliver in terms of connectivity, and think about not just car traffic along that road, the rail connections, the bus connections that we've been talking about, and everything else. So I look forward to it. Thank you.
And I know that with my Cambridge representative hat on, Cambridge residents would want me to raise, can we please make sure we're looking at the interchanges on both ends of the projected corridor as well as that corridor itself, so the Milton interchange, but obviously also Ely as well, and really thinking about any changes and the impact that's going to have as traffic of whatever type comes off of that corridor. Thank you. if that's it, then we will move on to the next item, which is an update on Peterborough Station Quarter. And I'm just looking, we have Anna Graham, Transport Programme Manager, to introduce the report. Thank you, Anna.
Good morning. I'll keep it brief. The Peterborough Station Quarter OBC has been prepared with strategic partners Network Rail and LNER and has been submitted to DFT and DLUT for review and approval. This was sent just before Christmas and is currently under review. So the subject to DFT approval of the OBC, this paper seeks the Transport and Infrastructure Committee's approval of the OBC and commencement into full business case recommendation to the Combined Authority Board. Thank you.
To find a way to be entirely elegant, removing my mask without having my glasses crash to the table every so often. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Rebecca, anyone else at this stage? Rebecca, to you, please.
Thank you. If the committee will indulge me, I'll make the same comments and plea that I made at the business board earlier this week, which is this station redevelopment has potential for huge difference, make a huge difference to Peterborough, and potential for a great deal of economic growth. But it is essential that we look beyond just the station redevelopment that is highlighted here, and we look about the essential links from that station quarter into the city centre and the use of the surrounding land, so we don't stifle that potential. This is a great project, but it is not the answer itself, and we must ensure that work continues to deliver that economic potential. And I look at it through a wider lens, not just a transport lens. Thank you.
Councillor Bisbee.
Yes, I'd like to agree with that. And this will actually match up with the buses and it'll bring people in. The buses hopefully then will be used better. But it is about the wider expansion of businesses in the area that are planned for Peterborough. We do need this in Peterborough and transport to and from Peterborough to be improved will actually help with bringing the businesses in. So I'm really happy that this is coming forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Anna.
Yes, thank you for your question. I just wanted to highlight that sort of the initial piece of work undertaken before launching sort of into the OBC was to look at the master plan. So it was looking at this project in a phased approach, of which this is just the first sort of programme stage, with a view of development more sort of wider to that. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. And I really do want to highlight, and I should just say there is a decision on this one, so I slightly jumped the gun there, but we're still within good time. Really want to highlight the amount of work that's gone into this, and particularly the excellent partnership working that is happening as part of this. And that's been something that has been a real feature of this project since the beginning, to have the Combined Authority and Peterborough City Council working so closely together in both securing and kind of putting into practice those funds. That's not a very good way of phrasing it, but you know what I mean. Really making sure that this delivers for the people of Peterborough and for the wider transport infrastructure. So I really want to thank our partners in Peterborough for the excellent partnership working that we're able to engage in here, and to all the members of staff here at the Combined Authority who have been part of this process. So if there are no further questions, we have two recommendations here. First of all, there is one to note, and we have put a grant note on this one. So we note that the Director of Place and Connectivity has the delegation to enter into a grant funding agreement of up to 1 million in consultation with the Chief Finance Officer and the Monitoring Officer. But also we have recommendation A, subject to the approval from the Department of Transport of the outline business case, recommend to the Combined Authority Board to approve the outline business case and approve the commencement of the full business case. So I'm happy to propose that. Councillor Bisbee, I'd imagine you'll want to second that. So that's proposed by myself, seconded by Councillor Bisbee. Can I see those in favour, please? And again, that is unanimous. Sorry, can I just see hands again? They were a bit quick there. That is unanimous from all voting members of the board. Thank you. So we now go on to the budget and performance report, item 11. Tim Greenwood, our finance manager, will introduce this report. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. This is an update to your regular budget monitoring report. It takes into account expenditure up to the 30th of November. The revenue position is much the same that has been reported to you before, an expected underspend on passenger transport of approximately 1.4 million, mainly due to concessionary fares. Capital programme, again, there's a couple of schemes there that you already knew about that there have been delays on and they're going to slip into the following financial year, being the A10 upgrade and Fletton Footbridge. There's a couple of other schemes now that we expect some delays on, again, for the expenditure to slip into the following financial year, being the A1260 junction 32/3 and the A141. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions on this item? Councillor Wakeford, anyone else at this stage? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Colleagues will appreciate, I think, my inability to let the 141 reference slip without comment in the paper, but thank you enormously for drawing attention to that. Clearly, the delay there is not news that's being presented to us in this finance paper, and it's not really for discussion there. But as the paper notes, there is the further ongoing delay. The minutes of last time recorded my substitute councillor Davenport Ray from Hunts speaking eloquently and reminding us about the importance of this project for our local plan here in Hunts, and indeed as articulated even before my time by HTC colleagues in the room with us. So don't need to dwell on at this point, but clearly, we're grateful for correspondence offline subsequent to that reminder last time, which of course reiterates points I've made previously, but our firm encouragement to do what we can to expedite this, and we stand ready to support and assist from HTC as much as we possibly can. So thanks for letting me squeeze that into what's essentially a finance item, Chair.
Thank you. And I know Tim would like to come in on that, but we'll take Councillor Sharp first.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question it's on page where are we? 367. And it's a question around the public transport bus services, Cambridgeshire County Council and then Peterborough City Council, where we've got, in the case of the County Council, the actual and then the forecast are higher than the budget, and it's the reverse situation for Peterborough. I just wonder, is that because we're seeing a greater usage of buses in Peterborough, therefore the subsidy required is less, and the opposite in the county council, or is that maybe the budget was slightly skewed? Is there something we can? I'm just trying to think if there's a interpretation we can draw from that.
Thank you. And that is item 3.4 of your paper. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I know, Tim, you want to come in first, and then we'll go back over to other Tim. It's getting confusing. Right.
Yeah, so just with regard to the A141, it's a part of the funding from the Transport and City Fund. So we are also trying to accelerate it as much as we can, because we're having had conversations with the Department for Transport they previously had a hard deadline of the end of March to get money out the door. I think with regard the good track record we got in other areas, I think that they are giving us a little bit longer. But Matthew Lux, the program manager, is looking to accelerate that as much as we can. So we will keep Hunt DC and the team updated through Tim's paper, but also we'll have those conversations offline.
Tim.
I mean, I think the position on those two, they reflect the actual expenditure on the bus services in those areas. I think there is an issue with the budget, and that will be reprofiled as part of the ongoing MTFP process.
It's more of a budget thing rather than any reflection on the the usage, shall we say? Yeah. Yeah. Ah, okay. Yeah, sure.
Steve, you may wish to come in on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a really helpful question. I think we just need to take that away and come back to you, to the committee, just to understand the differences there. One is quite the opposite to the other. So we just need to understand the causes of that and whether it's a budgeting question.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. What I was trying to get behind was whether we're getting a better take up in an urban area, say Peterborough, rather than the rural area. Obviously, we know it went down with COVID, and trying to get behind that really was where the thoughts of my question was.
Thank you. And this sounds a bit like something for the action log, so that we can come back on some of that. I've got Councillor Wakeford. I have got Mayor Nick. Councillor Wakeford first.
Yeah, just briefly, I wanted to thank Tim for coming back on that, and clearly we are having those conversations with you offline. So we've been reassured previously. It's helpful to have that noted, and I just wanted to underline our thanks for your ongoing efforts on that, of course.
Mayor Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's well, an open question to explore the reasoning and the reasons as to why there has been a deferral on the Fletton Keys footbridge expenditure. I might want to ask a question depending on the answer.
Okay, who's going to pick that up? Tim.
Well, as far as I'm aware, it's a complicated scheme. There's more than one source of funding that's being drawn upon, some of which are time limited. So I think they're being used first, effectively.
I think Tim's probably just answered the question. I know there's Towns Fund money that's going towards this project, and there's a timescale around the delivery of that. As far as I'm aware, the project is progressing as planned. There's no difficulties that I'm aware of with it. So I think our funding will be kicking in next year on that. And but if there's anything different to that, we'll let the committee know. But that's my understanding. Thanks.
I come back. Bearing in mind the location of the proposed crossover on the of the river there, and I'm aware that there are some challenges around the development in that area, particularly linked to some of the stuff around Peterborough City Council. Are we, in terms of the funding and putting in to this project, is there any chance that that will affect the progress of the project?
Yeah, I've asked that question of colleagues at the City Council, and there's no read across of those issues to the deliverability of this project.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Tim, thank you for this report. I think if people want a snapshot of the kind of work the Combined Authority is doing, looking at these charts that you've given us here in terms of the expenditure and the wide range of projects is a really, really helpful place to start. And thank you for bringing us this very informative and well presented document each time. We're really grateful to that. Now that I believe is just to note, so there is no vote on this one. which now brings us on to item 12, which is the Transport and Infrastructure Agenda Plan. Does the committee have any questions or comments on the agenda plan? Okay. Now, we now come to the final item, which is item 13. This item has exempt appendices, which, if disclosed, could adversely affect the commercial position of the county council and in turn the combined authorities position. So we will need to discuss the details of these appendices in private session. So I guess my question, without going into any detail, do the committee have questions, comments they would like to ask on this? Because if we're going to have this item presented and discussed, we will need to go into exempt session. Yes, Peter.
No, it was just an observation. As you're probably aware, it's coming to Highways Committee next week, including a lot of detail around it. So today I don't have any questions.
So just give me a moment. I'm just going to have a chat to our legal officer here. Right, so if everyone is happy simply to note the paper, there is no vote on this one, then we will complete the meeting and not go into private session. I am not trying to bump people into it. If people would like to go into private session, we will do that. There's just no point in doing it if no one has anything they want to ask. Okay, I'm taking that as assent. You see, I'm going very slowly on this because I don't want to be rushing people. Okay, so in that case, we will take item 14 as noted, which just leaves the date of the next meeting, which is Wednesday, the 13th of March at 2024 at 10 a.m. I believe we are as yet to confirm a location for that one, so we will get back to committee members as soon as possible with a location for that meeting, but it will be on Wednesday, the 13th of March. Thank you, everyone. We've had some excellent scrutiny, which I know has been extremely helpful. Thank you to officers for helping us keep to time as well with some very brief but informative presentations. Thank you to all the officers who have put excellent work in, and the committee is now